The skies over Earth were burning with explosions, flames, and a fury never seen before. A fleet of sleek black ships emerged from the void, their presence chilling. These ships were not human. They belonged to the Varun, a terrifying alien empire that had already conquered dozens of worlds. Their invasion of Earth was swift and brutal. The human fleet, caught off guard and unprepared, scrambled to mount a defense, but it was clear. Earth was facing annihilation. Captain Dean Voss, a skilled pilot aboard the human warship Hammerclaw, had been out on a routine mission to scout the edges of human space. What should have been a quiet reconnaissance turned into the beginning of a nightmare. Dean found himself thrust into the heart of a massive all-out war. The Varun had arrived with overwhelming force. As the explosions rained down around him, Dean could only think of one thing: survival. But that was before the girl. She was not human. Dean had never seen anyone like her before. Her name was Zilari, a member of a peaceful alien species called the Yilari. She had silver hair that shimmered in the dim light of the ship's cockpit, and her skin was a soft blue that glowed faintly. Her eyes, however, were the most striking feature. Deep pools of glowing blue that seemed to hold the weight of an ancient history. At first, Dean had thought she was a prisoner, someone caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Zilari had a different story. She didn't speak much about herself at first. Instead, she handed him a strange object, something that felt warm and alive in his hands. It was a crystal, smooth and clear, with faint pulses of light running through it. She said nothing about its true nature, but the moment she placed it in his palm, something changed. "It's a gift," she said in a soft voice. "Now, you and I are bound by the law of my people, husband and wife." Dean stared at her, bewildered. The shock wasn't in her words alone, but in the strange power he felt from the crystal in his hand. It hummed with energy, and in that instant, he felt an unexplainable connection to Zilari. He laughed, thinking she was joking, but she didn't smile. She just looked at him with those haunting eyes and said again, "We are bound by the Yilari law." Before Dean could even process what she was saying, the enemy came. The Varun ships, massive and deadly, started to circle Earth, cutting down humanity's defenses. The sounds of battle, screaming alarms, energy blasts, the clash of ships in combat filled the air. Dean's mind raced. He had no time to understand the situation. But one thing was certain: Earth was doomed unless he acted fast. He ordered the Hammerclaw to break through the Varun blockade, hoping to find a way to fight back. But then, something strange happened. Zilari spoke again, and this time her words were filled with urgency. "You must take us to the vault," she said, looking out at the stars. "The crystal can unlock the star seed. Only you can fly it." Dean didn't understand what she meant, but her voice was steady. It was clear that she was not just some innocent bystander caught up in this war. She knew something powerful, something that could change the tide of this battle. And that's when it clicked in Dean's mind. This wasn't just about a war for survival. It was about something much bigger. With the Hammerclaw racing through space and the Varun ships hot on their tail, Dean realized that he was no longer just a soldier trying to protect his home. He was the key to unlocking something ancient and powerful, something that might just be able to stop the Varun from wiping out humanity. As Zilari's calm presence settled beside him, Dean made a promise to himself. He would fight, not just for survival, but for a future where humanity could stand strong, even against the darkest forces in the galaxy. And maybe, just maybe, this alien girl's strange gift would be the weapon that turned the tide. But first, they had to survive the coming storm. Dean's hands gripped the controls of the Hammerclaw, his mind racing. The starry void outside the cockpit seemed to have turned into a hellish battlefield. The Varun fleet, massive and menacing, was closing in on them, its ships massive like dark shadows in the sky. The explosions and fiery flashes from the planet below still echoed in his ears. Earth, his home, was burning, and there was no time to waste. The enemy had overwhelmed the human fleet, tearing through defenses as if they were nothing more than paper. Dean's pulse hammered in his chest, but there was no time to panic. His eyes darted across the console, checking the ship's status. The Hammerclaw was fast, agile, but even it would be no match against the Varun warships unless he could find a way to escape the trap that was closing around them. Solari sat calmly behind him, her glowing blue eyes fixed on the chaos outside. Despite the destruction all around, she was strangely composed, as if she had been in far worse situations before. Dean didn't have time to wonder about her past. All he cared about was survival, both his and hers. She had given him the crystal, that strange, warm object that still hummed in his palm, and he felt its power even now, pulsing softly with a life of its own. She had told him it was a gift, but in the midst of all this madness, he wasn't sure what that truly meant. "Are you sure about this?" Dean asked, his voice tight. The Hammerclaw rocked as a blast from a Varun warship slammed into the shields. He quickly adjusted the ship's trajectory, diving into the debris of Earth's shattered defense fleet, using the wreckage as cover. Solari didn't answer right away, her gaze fixed on the flashing lights of the ship's console. "Yes. You must take us to the vault," she said, her voice soft but urgent. "It is the only place where the starseed can be activated." Dean frowned, his mind trying to process everything. He had heard stories of ancient ships, lost weapons, of the Yalari, but none of it made sense. What was she talking about? Why him? He was just a pilot, not some kind of legendary hero. But before he could ask more questions, another blast rocked the ship, shaking it violently. The Varun were not giving up. They were getting closer, and it was clear that if they didn't find a way out of this, they would both be dead within minutes. Dean didn't have time for hesitation. His hands flew over the controls, taking the Hammerclaw into a sharp turn and heading into the distant edge of space. If he could just lose them long enough to figure out where they were going, he might have a chance. But the Varun weren't so easily fooled. They tracked him through the chaos, never giving up, never backing off. One ship, a massive Varun dreadnought, flanked him, cutting off his escape. The deadly ship's guns powered up, and Dean's heart skipped a beat. He didn't have much time. "We're running out of options here," Dean shouted, his fingers moving rapidly across the ship's controls, trying to evade the enemy's fire. "We must go to the vault. The crystal will guide you," Solari said, her voice calm as ever. "There is no other way." Dean clenched his teeth. There was no other choice. He had to trust her, had to trust the crystal. He dove toward a nearby asteroid field, hoping to lose the Varun in the twisted rocks and debris. The Hammerclaw rocked violently as another blast grazed its shields. Sweat dripped down Dean's face, but his focus remained unbroken. He wasn't about to let his ship and Solari fall into enemy hands. Suddenly, something unexpected happened. The crystal in his hand flared to life, glowing brightly. He felt the ship respond to it, a connection forming between the crystal, the ship, and himself. It was as though the ship was listening to him, responding to his every command. He turned to Solari, who nodded. "This is the vault," she said softly. Before Dean could react, the stars outside twisted, and a strange energy washed over them. The Hammerclaw blinked, vanishing from the asteroid field and reappearing in a different part of space. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. The crystal had activated something, opening a rift in space itself. They had just entered a hidden sector, far from the Varun's reach. They had made it, for now. But Dean knew the real battle was just beginning. The Varun wouldn't give up easily, and whatever Zalari had been talking about, the Star Seed, was still a mystery. But he felt a strange sense of purpose now. They were on the edge of something big, something that could change the fate of humanity. The only question was, would they survive long enough to unlock it? The Hammerclaw drifted silently through the rift, the hum of the engines a dull thrum against the stillness of space. Dean sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the glowing, unknown expanse around them. It was a place unlike any he had ever seen, a deep shadowed void where stars seemed distant and far away. The rift had closed behind them, cutting off their path back to Earth, and now they were truly alone. The Varun for the moment were far behind, lost in the wake of the strange energy field that had transported them. But Dean knew this peace wouldn't last long. The Varun would be relentless, and they would eventually find a way to track them down. For now, though, the immediate danger had passed, and Dean allowed himself a brief moment of calm. Zalari sat beside him, her presence almost ethereal in the quiet. Her glowing blue eyes never wavered, constantly scanning their surroundings. She hadn't spoken much since the rift had closed, but Dean could feel the weight of the silence between them. She was watching him, waiting for him to understand something. He could tell she had a plan, but it wasn't clear what that plan was, or how he fit into it. The crystal in his hand pulsed with soft, rhythmic light, as though calling out to something in the depths of space. It had a strange power, one that seemed to resonate with the ship, the stars, and perhaps even the universe itself. But Dean didn't understand what it was meant to do. After a long pause, Zalari finally spoke, breaking the silence. "We are close," she said, her voice calm yet urgent. "The vault is just ahead. It holds what we need to stop the Varun." Dean nodded but didn't answer. He wasn't sure what she meant by the vault, or how it could possibly hold the key to defeating an enemy as powerful as the Varun. He had seen their ships, massive, terrifying, and equipped with weapons capable of destroying entire planets. But Zalari seemed confident. Her certainty was unsettling. He didn't know what made her so sure, but it made him realize how little he actually knew about what was really at stake. Suddenly, the ship's sensors began to beep, pulling Dean's attention back to the controls. A small light blinked on the console, indicating something approaching. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't a weapon. It was something far stranger. Dean tightened his grip on the controls, his heart racing as he tried to make sense of the readings. Zalari's calm voice broke through the rising tension. "It's the vault," she explained. "It's waking up." Dean's breath caught in his throat. The vault? Waking up? What was she talking about? Before he could ask, a strange light began to fill the cockpit, and the Hammerclaw shuddered as if the very fabric of space was bending. Around them, the ship's shields flickered as the energy surged through the space around them. Then, with a sudden jolt, the ship dropped out of normal space entirely. The stars outside vanished, replaced by an eerie glow that filled the entire cockpit. The Hammerclaw was surrounded by something ancient, something that didn't belong in the universe as they knew it. In front of them was a massive structure, a colossal floating object that seemed to pulse with its own life. It was a ship, but it was unlike anything Dean had ever seen before. It was organic, its surface rippling like the skin of some colossal beast, yet there was an undeniable sense of technology in its form. It was as if the ship itself was alive, Dean stared in awe as the hammerclaw drifted closer, drawn in by an invisible force. "This is the starseed," Zeleri said, her voice full of reverence. "This is the key to everything." Dean's mind raced as he tried to comprehend what she was saying. The starseed? Was this what they had been searching for? It didn't seem real. It looked like some kind of giant alien artifact. An ancient vessel, or perhaps something far older, something that had been lost to time. And now, somehow, they were at its doorstep. The ship's massive doors slowly began to open, revealing a cavernous interior. The hammerclaw floated forward, guided by an unseen hand. Dean had no choice but to follow, as the force pulling them in seemed irresistible. Zeleri remained calm, her gaze fixed on the massive structure ahead. "This is where the final battle will be fought," she said quietly. "But it's not just the Varun who will come for us. Others, those who seek the starseed's power, will also try to take it. We must be ready." Dean could feel the weight of her words settling on his shoulders. This was bigger than he had imagined. The fate of humanity wasn't just about surviving the Varun. It was about something much more ancient, more powerful. Something the galaxy had forgotten. And somehow he was part of it now. As the hammerclaw glided into the starseed's dark, pulsating interior, Dean knew that their fight was far from over. In fact, it had only just begun. The interior of the starseed was like nothing Dean had ever experienced. The walls, if they could even be called walls, seemed to shift and pulse with an organic life of their own, as though the ship was breathing. The corridors twisted in ways that defied logic, the shapes and patterns shifting as they moved deeper inside. It was unlike anything that had been built by any known species. The very air seemed to hum with energy, the atmosphere thick with a sense of ancient power. As the hammerclaw floated into the heart of this strange vessel, Dean felt a strange pull in his chest, a connection to the ship that he couldn't explain. It was as if the starseed itself was aware of their presence, as if it was alive and waiting for something. Zeleri was already out of her seat, moving toward the hatch. Her movements were fluid, graceful, as though she belonged here, like this place was a second home to her. Dean, however, hesitated. He felt out of place, like an intruder in a sacred space. The sheer size and mystery of the starseed were overwhelming, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them, lurking just beyond the corners of his mind. "We must move quickly," Zeleri said, her voice calm but urgent. She stepped through the hatch, her footsteps barely making a sound on the smooth, shifting floor. Dean followed, feeling the weight of her words as he stepped into the heart of the starseed. The inside of the ship was vast, more like a city than a vessel. The ceiling soared high above them, and the walls seemed to stretch endlessly into the distance. Strange lights illuminated the path ahead, casting long, shifting shadows. It was eerily quiet, save for the soft hum of energy that filled the air. As they walked, Dean noticed that the walls seemed to respond to their presence, the surface rippling like water, as if the ship itself was reacting to their movements. "Where are we going?" Dean asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the unsettling surroundings. "To the core," Zeleri replied. "It's there that we'll find the power to stop the Varun. But it will not be easy. The starseed's guardians will not allow us to take its power without a fight." Dean's heart skipped a beat. Guardians? He had heard stories of ancient technologies with their own protectors, but this was something different. The starseed wasn't just an ancient relic. It was a living, breathing entity, and it was protected by forces far beyond anything he could comprehend. Before he could respond, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Dean's heart raced as the hum of the ship grew louder, more intense. The walls seemed to pulse with energy, and a low, resonating sound filled the air. It was like the starseed was waking up, or perhaps like it was reacting to something. Then, suddenly, the silence was shattered by a loud crash, and the floor beneath them split open. From the depths of the ship, a massive, hulking figure emerged. It was unlike anything Dean had ever seen. Towering over them, the Guardian was made of strange metallic flesh, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It moved with terrifying speed, its massive form effortlessly crossing the distance between them in an instant. The air crackled with energy as it raised its hand, and Dean instinctively drew back, his heart pounding in his chest. "This is the Guardian," Zeleri said, her voice barely a whisper. "It will test us. We must defeat it to gain access to the core." Dean didn't have time to question her words. The Guardian lunged and instinct took over. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the massive arm that swung toward him. The floor cracked beneath the Guardian's powerful blow, sending tremors through the ship. Dean scrambled to his feet, his mind racing. He had no weapons, no way to fight this creature. All he had was the crystal, the strange glowing object that Zeleri had given him. He reached into his pocket, pulling it out, feeling its warmth against his palm. As he did, he felt a surge of power, something ancient and unstoppable coursing through him. Without thinking, he held the crystal out toward the Guardian. It was a desperate move, but it was the only thing he could think of. The crystal pulsed with light, and the Guardian stopped in its tracks. It stared at the glowing object in Dean's hand, its eyes narrowing. For a moment, everything was still. Then, with a sound like thunder, the Guardian let out a roar and charged again. Dean barely had time to react. The crystal flared with a brilliant light, and suddenly, the Guardian was knocked back by an invisible force. It crashed to the ground, its massive body skidding across the floor. Dean stared in disbelief as the Guardian struggled to rise, but it was no use. The crystal's power had overwhelmed it. Solari stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "You have awakened the starseed," she said quietly. "It has chosen you." Dean's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what that meant. The crystal, the Guardian. It had all been part of something much bigger than him. The fate of humanity, of the galaxy, rested in his hands. But as they moved deeper into the starseed, Dean couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Varun were still out there, and there were far greater threats ahead. Yet, for the first time, he felt a glimmer of hope. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was part of something much greater, something that could change everything. The deeper Dean and Zeleri ventured into the starseed, the more intense the feeling of being watched grew. The ship itself seemed to be alive, responding to their presence in ways that were both unsettling and awe-inspiring. The walls continued to pulse with an ancient, otherworldly energy, and the air was thick with a strange hum, like the heartbeat of the universe itself. Dean could feel the weight of it all, the power of the starseed, the responsibility that now rested on his shoulders. But the deeper they went, the more he realized that their enemies weren't just the Varun. The starseed was old, older than anything they had encountered, and there were others who wanted its power. The Varun were just the first wave. As they reached the core of the ship, Dean's grip on the crystal tightened. It was glowing brighter now, responding to the ship's energy, and he could feel the pull, like an invisible force drawing him forward. But as they entered the heart of the starseed, they found something unexpected. A massive chamber stretched out before them, filled with an ancient glowing machinery that looked almost alive. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and atop it lay an object, the source of the starseed's power. It pulsed with energy, and as Dean stepped closer, the crystal in his hand began to resonate with it. But just as he reached for the pedestal, a loud roar echoed through the chamber, and the ground shook beneath their feet. The guardian they had defeated earlier wasn't the only one. More of them appeared, towering, monstrous beings, each one a living weapon of the starseed. Zalari's face hardened, and she stepped forward, her eyes glowing with determination. "We must destroy them," she said. "Only then can we activate the core and stop the Varun." Dean didn't hesitate. With the crystal in his hand, he felt a surge of power, and as the guardians charged toward them, he raised his hand, releasing a burst of energy. The blast sent one of the guardians crashing into the wall, its body disintegrating into dust. But there were more coming. The fight that followed was chaotic and intense. Dean and Zalari fought side by side, using every ounce of strength and skill they had. The guardians were formidable, their massive forms crashing into the walls, sending shockwaves through the chamber. Dean could barely keep up, but the crystal in his hand kept him going, giving him the power he needed to push through. The battle seemed endless, each strike from the guardians causing the starseed to shake and tremble. But despite their overwhelming strength, Dean and Zalari kept fighting, never giving up. With each fallen guardian, the power of the starseed seemed to grow stronger. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the guardians fell. The chamber was silent once more. The two of them were breathing heavily, covered in sweat and dust. But they had done it. They had won. Dean turned to Zalari, his heart racing. "What now?" he asked, still clutching the glowing crystal. Zalari smiled, her eyes filled with a quiet satisfaction. "Now we activate the core," she said. "With the power of the starseed, we can stop the Varun and protect the galaxy." Dean stepped forward, his hand trembling as he reached for the pedestal. The moment his fingers brushed against it, a surge of energy coursed through him. The crystal in his hand glowed brighter than ever before, and the entire chamber lit up with an intense, blinding light. Dean's mind was flooded with visions of battles, of stars burning, of civilizations rising and falling. He could see the future, and he could see the past. The starseed had shown him everything. As the light dimmed, Dean realized that he had tapped into something greater than himself. He had unlocked the power of the starseed, and with it, he now held the key to stopping the Varun and any other threat that might come their way. The galaxy was depending on him, on them, to use this power wisely. He turned to Zalari, who nodded, in approval. "We have to go," she said, her voice steady. "The Varun will be here soon." Dean nodded, his mind racing. They had done it. They had activated the core, and now they had the power to protect humanity. But the battle was far from over. The Varun were still out there, and they would stop at nothing to seize the starseed for themselves. Dean had no illusions about the challenges ahead, but he also knew that they were no longer alone in this fight. With the power of the starseed and the strength of humanity's will, they stood a chance. And with that thought, they began their journey back to the battle, the final battle that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The final stage of their journey was the most perilous. With the core of the starseed activated and its immense power now in their hands, Dean and Zalari raced against time. The Varun, a merciless alien race, had already begun to close in, and they were determined to take the starseed's power for themselves. Dean could feel the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for humanity's survival. The starseed's energy pulsed through him, a constant reminder of the responsibility he carried. Zalari, ever calm and focused, led the way back through the shifting corridors of the starseed. The ship seemed to respond to their urgency, its walls bending and adjusting to their path, but it also seemed to grow more unstable, as if it was pushing them forward with an almost sentient will. They reached the ship's command center, a vast space filled with technology so advanced it seemed like magic. The center was surrounded by enormous windows, giving them a view of the vastness of space. Outside, they could see the Varun fleet closing in, their dark, menacing ships filling the sky. Dean could feel the tension building in his chest. They had no time to waste. Zalari stepped forward to the control panel and began to work quickly. "We must activate the ship's weapon systems," she said, her voice steady despite the impending danger. "The Starseed's power is enough to destroy the Varun fleet, but it will require precision and timing. We need to sync the crystal with the weapon system, and I cannot do it alone." Dean nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He approached the panel, holding the glowing crystal tightly in his hand. The moment he connected it to the system, a surge of energy flowed through him. The Starseed's weapon systems activated with a hum, and the vast energy that had been dormant within the ship came to life. It was as if the entire vessel had awakened, ready for battle. Outside, the Varun ships were closing in. Dean could see them now, their dark forms flickering against the backdrop of distant stars. They were massive, far larger than anything humanity had ever faced. Yet for the first time, Dean didn't feel fear. He felt empowered. With the Starseed's power coursing through him, he felt invincible. Zalari's voice broke through his thoughts. "They're almost in range," she said. "We have one shot at this. We must focus." Dean tightened his grip on the crystal and focused on the ship's weapons. The Starseed systems began to glow brighter, its immense energy charging up for the final assault. Dean could feel the heat of the energy, the raw power vibrating through the crystal in his hand. As the Varun ships closed in, the tension in the command center grew unbearable. They were almost there, just a moment away from unleashing the Starseed's wrath. Zalari gave him a final nod. "Now!" she shouted. Dean pressed the crystal into the panel, releasing the energy in a concentrated blast. The Starseed's weapons unleashed with a deafening roar, a beam of energy so powerful it lit up the entire battlefield. The Varun ships were obliterated in an instant, their hulking forms torn apart by the intensity of the blast. The destruction was immense, a testament to the power of the Starseed, and the very fabric of space seemed to warp as the energy collided with the Varun fleet. For a moment, there was silence. The massive fleet that had once threatened humanity was no more. The Starseed's energy had decimated them, leaving nothing but debris and silence in its wake. But the victory was short-lived. As the light from the blast faded, Dean could feel the strain of the power in his body. The crystal had drained most of its energy, and the Starseed was beginning to lose stability. Zalari turned to him, her face a mix of concern and resolve. "We need to leave now," she said. The ship trembled, and Dean could feel the walls shifting violently, as if the Starseed itself was starting to collapse. There was no time to waste. They raced through the corridors, the ship groaning and shaking around them. The power was fading, and they had only moments to escape before the Starseed imploded. Dean and Zalari reached the escape pod bay, breathless and covered in sweat. The Starseed was falling apart around them, and the shock waves from the weapon's blast had caused critical damage to its core. They had done what they set out to do, but at a great cost. The escape pods were their only chance now. As they strapped themselves in, Dean could hear the distant roar of the collapsing Starseed, its massive form beginning to crumble under the weight of its own power. With a sudden jolt, the escape pod shot out into the void of space, and they watched as the Starseed, The weapon that had saved them was consumed in a fiery explosion. The shockwave pushed them farther away, and for a moment, the vast emptiness of space felt overwhelmingly quiet. Dean looked out at the wreckage of the starseed, knowing that it had given everything to protect humanity. He felt a wave of gratitude for the ship that had chosen him, but also a deep sadness. They had won, but at what cost? As the debris of the starseed drifted in space, Solari's voice broke the silence. "We did it," she said. "Humanity is safe. For now." Dean nodded, but he knew the battle was far from over. The Varun were gone, but the universe was vast, and there would always be new threats. Humanity had proven itself strong, but they would need to stay vigilant. And as the escape pod drifted toward the distant stars, Dean couldn't help but wonder, what would be the next challenge?